Awesome. Hello, good. Switching camera. Hi, good evening, good afternoon to everyone who joined us virtually, and of course, those who are here in person. Welcome to our October LSP community meeting. We are so very happy to have with us Dr. Catherine Meeks for a conversation this evening. We are looking forward to that. And happy soon to be fall. It's probably fall already to all of you who are here. And the numbers are just climbing up. So that is awesome. As usual, we're going to start with a call to calm and then a few announcements. We have I would say guest, but Tom is an old friend of LSP, and he's used to this. He's one of our former board members, past board president, and he knows Dr. Catherine Meeks as well. He's going to lead us in our call to calm.
Thank you, Rich. Yes, my name is Tom Momberg, and I'm an old friend now, as I approach my 75th birthday, not too long from now. I asked Rich if I could offer a lead to our call to calm, or 3 minutes of silence this evening, considering what has been going on in our world, especially in Israel. And my invitation tonight for us to be quiet for a bit and center and calm our hearts and minds is the invitation to peace within ourselves, so that we might be an instrument of peace for others. So I'm going to ring a bell. We will have 3 minutes. And I'll ring the bell again to conclude our time.
Recording in progress.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with
Thank you, Tom. Few quick announcements, some housekeeping. Again, for those who are online, the Q&A is open. So if you have a question while we are talking, you can put it in there, and I will moderate and try and get it in there and read it out. For those who are here live, of course, you can do it the old-fashioned way. Just raise your hand, and we will acknowledge you. Announcements. This Saturday, the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project is having their lynching conference, symposium at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland. I have been asked to speak on behalf of LSP about the community remembrance work that we do. It is live and virtual. So in our newsletter, if you subscribe to our newsletter, you should have that announcement and the link to register for that symposium. It's 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday. And the sessions are like 45 minutes to an hour. And so you can pop in, pop out to and listen to whatever interests you. Randy, our very own ambassador, told us about an exhibit at the National Civil Rights Museum that's going on until November. It's on Emmett Till. After our conversation with Dr. Meeks, he'll give a summary of I don't know if it was the opening night for it last week, but there was a conversation last week that he attended there. So he'll report out on that. Coming soon, we will be updating our website/video archives. As you guys know, we do record our talks with our speakers, and we have not been able to update our website for a while and YouTube channel. So we are moving on that, and so expect an announcement on when that'll open back up again in the next several days. So I'm excited about that. Now, without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Jasper St. Bernard, our very own board member and board secretary. He is originally from Philadelphia, and he moved to Memphis to obtain his Ph.D. in philosophy at the University of Memphis with a study concentration on the works of Ida B. Wells. And of course, he's the expert on that. He can tell you more about that when I turn it on over to him. And he will be having the conversation with Dr. Meeks. Oh, one other thing. I have logged in on my phone, so if you have a question here live, I'll pass it around so we have a mic so she can better hear. Okay?
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Meeks.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great.
I'm really excited about this, that they were gracious enough to let me be the one to sort of talk through some things with you. I am in the dissertating phase of this process here at the University of Memphis. My concentration is on African-American philosophy, and I look mainly in the late 19th, early 20th century. And the dissertation itself is about Ida B. Wells and her anti-lynching work. So as I was reading, in preparation for this, I sort of focused on this book, Passionate for Justice. And it's such a rich book for something so they assign us books and they're just really thick. So for a book to be this thick, the amount of gems that fell out of it, it was so much. It was so rich. I can have you here all night, but I will not do that. I won't do that. What I do want to ask you, I have a few questions, mainly focusing on the first and final chapter. But before I get into those, I wanted to hear maybe you talk through how you came to write the book, what brought you to this particular book, and maybe specifically to hear more about the method that you chose to co-write a book about Ida B. Wells and just some of that process. So how you came to the book and how you came to the particular method in writing, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, sure. And of course, Ida B. Wells is somebody that has been a companion of mine for a good long time. I've taught classes that I designed specifically around her and her work. And for many, many years, I kept saying, I want to write a book about her one of these times. And I met Nib Stroop, who is a white man, who's a Presbyterian minister, who basically was saying the same thing, but had been told by the African-American women in the church that he pastored that he should not write the book by himself. And so we got engaged in conversations about Ida B. Wells and our love and respect for her, as well as the amazing challenge that she offers to us all to be passionate about justice and to have the courage to do something with that passion besides just sit around and be disturbed. And so after about 2 years of conversation, Nibs and I decided that we either needed to write the book or we needed to stop talking about it. And so because you either need to do it or go do what you're going to talk about. And so we, Church Publishing, I presented a proposal to them, which they liked and accepted. And it's turned out to be, it turned out to be a good conversation between Nibs and me. And we chose to put some things in where we were trying to hash out our own differences and understanding to show people, particularly, it's really difficult in the conversations on race for white people and people of color to have a decent and honest conversation because we're tiptoeing around each other and trying to be careful, trying to make sure we don't ruffle any feathers, rather than just telling the truth and being honest with one another. So we wrote the book with that in mind. We want this to be a conversation. We want it to be honest. And sometimes you can see we disagreed with each other, and we can do that and still be friends with one another and still be engaged with one another. We don't have to be always trying to worry about if nobody's feelings are going to be hurt. You may get your feelings hurt, but you have some kind of relationship that allows you to contain that, to handle it, to know, any kind of decent relationship, sooner or later, somebody's going to hurt somebody's feelings, but you don't run and hide every time you get feelings hurt. Oh, excuse me for just 1 second. I'm so sorry to do this, but there's a little bit of an emergency and I need to talk to this person for just a second.
Okay. Okay. While we wait, how many of you have read this book?
How many?
I've read this book.
I've listened.
Or some of it, or yeah.
1.5 times. It's read by the authors. It's really nice.
It struck me, the reason I was asking about the method is because it struck me that it's very similar to the work we're trying to do at LSP and how hard that work can be.
I'm so sorry. I'm back, Jasper. My friend's sister is in Israel who was just calling me, and I just had to say something to him. So if you all will please excuse the interruption. But and I'm so glad that you are working on Ida B. Wells. I'm so glad to see a young person interrogating her ideas and bringing those ideas into conversations on African-American philosophy, because she didn't actually get what she deserved during her day because she was a woman and she was way ahead of her time. So the book is there to foster conversation, and her particular work around lynching, which I think we've got a lot of work to do. I'm so thankful that you all are doing what you're doing around all of that, because we need to do a lot of work around lynching and have a lot of healing happen in both Black and white communities as a result of that piece of our very unfortunate history.
Yeah. One of the questions, something you said a couple of minutes ago that I kind of want to hone on in, and I'm trying not to be selfish, and just pick your brain about my dissertation. But there is a question that like I've been very interested in as of late. Earlier in my studies, I was assigned to read Claudia Rankine's book Citizen that came out 2014. And one of the things Claudia Rankine does in that book is it's like a series of like short, like episodic stories of different moments where racism sort of crept into the experience of this narrator. But she never names the narrator. She just uses the pronoun you in every story. So like you go into the store and you get profiled, that kind of thing. And I was always fascinated at what that did to the reader, to hear like you over if they were a white reader or a black reader. And so when I was reading your book, one of the things I noticed was the pronoun we that just kept coming up. And it came up in really interesting times, right? Because you were co-writing this book, but there seemed to be times where the we wasn't necessarily tracking with both of you, like the we sort of um it was in chapter 1 where he talked about how the hierarchy of race was to convince we white men that they, and I was like, that's really interesting in a co-written book. So I wanted to know what you thought about like why there were times where you didn't look to separate out, like that's not me, that's him, right? Like, or like there were times where you just let the we be we, because I'm interested in how that pronoun can get in the way of progress.
Yeah.
And so what were your thoughts about the use of we there as opposed to
So I don't
him
want to
being
get too far
separate?
into the weeds with this and lose the audience because their interest will be in probably other things. But Nibs and I tried to make it clear which one of us was speaking at any given
Okay,
time. So we were each speaking for ourselves. We weren't writing this book as together. We were together and we were not together. You know,
okay,
when we were writing our section, that was our section. And we were writing it
okay,
together in conversation with each other. So when he talks about we, he's talking about white folks. When I talk about we, I'm talking primarily about African Americans mostly,
uh-huh.
because I consider myself to be a part of the group that I'm talking about. But so it wasn't like Rankin's book, I don't think at all. I think it was because our conversation, we really did try to demarcate that enough for the reader to get, this is Nib speaking, that's Catherine speaking.
Okay. Okay, that makes
So
sense.
I
Because
think
I
we should
noticed like,
probably not get too far in the weeds with all that, actually.
yeah, no. I agree. I wanna you talk about I wanted to hear your thoughts. You talk about race as a social construction in that first chapter, and that is all the rave right now, at least in academic circles and non-academic circles, right? This idea that race is not real, it's manufactured. But at the same time, even as you clarified right there, right, you understand yourself to be a black woman. So I wanted to hear what you had to say about people who think that if we just stop talking about race, that's the means to progress. Like if we were to just
Right.
drop the labels today, would that would bring some solution, even though that's not what Ida B. Wells pushed, and that's not what you're pushing in the book. So what do you have to say about that balance between understanding race as a social construction created to dominate, but at the same time not relinquishing the idea that you are very much a black woman and he is very much a white man, and you're not trying to get from around that.
I think we have to be very careful, with our academic pursuits and analysis and what those things have to do with reality. So you do not tell the mother whose son has just been murdered by the police in a very unfortunate extrajudicial killing that race is a social construction. You don't talk like that, because if race were not a part of it, her son would probably not be dead. The understanding sociologically, psychologically, politically, however you want to look at it, that we have set up these categories to demarcate people and create structures and hierarchies and systems is one thing. But the everyday reality of living in America is that race is a real thing. You know, I mean, when we say it's a social construction, it simply means that we made this up and we made it up for a reason. But the fact of the
Right.
matter that it's been made up and the world has been constructed around that made up notion. Therefore, on a day-to-day basis, we have to deal with the reality of what that social construction means. And you can't just dismiss the systemic racism in the United States of America by saying race is a social construction. That is
Yeah.
a nonsense. That is a nonsense answer to the
Yeah.
issue of racism in America, and an answer that somebody uses to keep from dealing with the reality that we need to reconstruct the systems and create a more system that is a more inclusive system. And so while I mean, I'm a retired professor, so I know a little bit about academic constructions, and we love to do all this, and the stuff we do in the academy is great and wonderful, and I love higher education and I love the life of the mind, but we also have to deal with the reality of how everyday life is played out and what that social construction has done to impact everyday people, including us who are sitting here coming up with these lofty theories. Now, race is not going to go away if we quit talking about it. That's a
Right.
daydream that somebody has, that it's not going to go away. I've heard that. I've been told that too. In my 50 years of doing this work, I've heard that more than once. It's not that we are making up the issue. It's none of it. Nothing goes away just because you quit talking about it. You have to deal with it. And Ida B. Wells would be here to tell us lynching wasn't going to go away just because you quit talking about it. It went
Right.
away.
Right.
It still hasn't gone away, but it became less because people were talking about it, because
Right.
people were
Yeah.
writing about it, because the Ida B. Wellses were standing up. And as we continue in the 21st century to fight the darkness of racism and its family members, we need to remember that speaking up and speaking out and resisting are still the tools that have to be used to deal with this. And we're not going to get out of the whole mess we're in by sticking our heads under the cover.
Yeah. Agreed. I appreciate that. I would like if you could walk me through. So you talk a lot about in the book about history and the sort of seemingly cyclical nature of history. It's not quite as bad as when Ida B. Wells, but we do seem to be in these cycles. And you have this line where you say that American history is rather pessimistic, but we choose to be inspired. And so, what if you could unpack the relationship between history and this sort of cyclical and attempts toward pessimism, right? Because things don't seem to be changing like we hope they would. But you also say that imagining the impossible is the key to getting to new possibilities. So, I would like to hear more about that relationship from you specifically about that relationship between history and the imagination. When, as you were just saying, like a lot of this race, the way race was weaponized was based on imagination and myth. And so how do you keep separate that sort of pessimistic turn that history seems to want to pull you toward and remain imagining of impossibilities in the face of the cycle?
Yeah, Vincent Harding, the wonderful African-American historian and spiritual leader that he was, had actually used to sing a song about imagining a new world. And James Baldwin said that you can't change everything you can name, but anything that you don't name, you'll never change. So imagination can't just be, you're off in the clouds and don't have your feet on the ground, but you can be in the midst of a bad situation and you can see possibilities. That to me is how imagination becomes a helper. that
Mm.
evidently the enslaved Africans had fantastic imagination to be able to imagine a day beyond slavery, because you think you've been jerked out of your home, you've been brought here, you're being brutalized, you're being treated poorly, but you continue to believe in life. You believe the sun is coming up in the morning, no matter how dark it is today. You know, my last book is called The Night is Long, but Light is Coming in the Morning. And it's a collection of meditations on race, which try to bear witness to the fact that history does go in cycles and circles, and it's very repetitious. Every time we make a little progress, we take about 10 steps back past the progress we made, a lot of the time trying to act like we want to be worse the next time than we were before. So when you have that sense of that, and then the sense of hope, I think imagination and hope probably have to go together, because you have to have something, some reason to have hope. And when I look at the cycles, when I look at, you know, we went through a civil war, we went through Reconstruction, we went through Jim Crow, and we've gone through a whole bunch of different eras in this country, and we're in a pretty messy one at the moment. But I do believe, because we have been through those others and we've come out on the other side with some things being better and sometimes some things seeming like they're worse, but the change will come. That is the hope. That is my imagination, that there will be a better day, that someday down the road, young people like yourself won't have to struggle with the same things you're having to struggle with, you know, in this country. And whether it ever happens or not, it makes life better to imagine it than it does not to. And so if you're gonna, if you're gonna spend your energy, let's spend it on creating a new image, which is what Vincent Harding was saying. Let's imagine a new world. Let's imagine a world of peace. Let's imagine a world. Earlier, Tom did the reflection on peace. Let's imagine a world where peace exists. Let's imagine a peaceful Middle East, a peaceful Ukraine. Let's imagine it, because imagination doesn't cost us anything. We can imagine the positive just as well as the negative. And if it's true that the more positive energy we put out into the universe, the more it negates the negative, which I believe from the bottom of my heart, then let's be positive. You know, looking at the glass and saying it's half empty doesn't take any more energy than looking at it saying it's half full. But it shifts everything. It shifts everything. If you say it's half full, it's easier to fill it up. If you say it's half empty, you might worry more about how do I get it full.
Yeah.
And it's subtle.
No,
it's subtle, but it's a subtlety that if you practice it enough, you really begin to live into. You know, when you go out with some hope in the mornings, how much different the day is than when you go out a little bit in a funk or in despair.
Yeah, no, that's great. I another thing that jumped out to me is when you look at, and your book points this out, and then when you look at her Ida B. Wells' autobiography, she seems to understand in an interesting way how her life is tracking with American history. And so what I mean by that is, right, she was born enslaved, just on the edge of it. And then she sort of comes into her early adulthood during Reconstruction, and she you point out you point out in the book that, like, just after the Supreme Court takes down that the Civil Rights Act of 1875, they say it's unconstitutional and separate is okay. That's when she's on the train and they like, well, you have to move, and she does, and she doesn't. And so it's interesting at certain moments in her life how it's sort of a microcosm or a snapshot of like where we are in America. And so what I appreciate about you just saying is that we don't see Ida B. Wells ever locked in to the moment, right? So the train thing, for instance, she could have easily just gotten up, but her imagination was too broad to move, if that makes any sense. And
well,
so she was
I
gonna.
think in her case, it was not only imagination, it was also resistance. Resistance to a system that was denigrating her. And and perhaps imagination helps you to be a resistor. But she grew
Right,
up in
one
a
fuels,
she
sorry,
grew
go
up
ahead,
in a
sorry.
household where her father was a resistor. Her father was what
Yeah,
they called a race man because he resisted the systems of oppression. She learned to do that. She learned not to have to take the oppression as a given, that she could stand against it. She was very young when she sat and refused to get off the move from her seat. And then for those of
right,
you that don't know, then they threw her off the train and she sued the railroads company and won the lawsuit. And if she'd not had a dishonest lawyer, she may have won the appeal. But she lost in the appeal because her lawyer didn't represent her very well. But to think of a young Black woman suing a railroad company in the early 1800s like that is
right,
amazing. And it has
right.
something to do with a sense of agency, a sense of I don't have to say yes to this. And that was the same spirit that she brought to many other things. I mean, the first and foremost example of Ida B. Wells' amazing capacity to see possibilities and to step up to the plate happened when her parents died within 12 hours of each other in a yellow fever epidemic and left her and her siblings without parents. And people were discussing dividing the kids up and parceling them out to people. And she said, my parents will turn over in their grave if we do that. I'm going to take care of them. She was 16 years old. Nobody
Right.
knows a 16-year-old with that kind of courage and sense of agency. So we can't
Not
we
mine.
can't talk about we can't talk about her and the work that the legacy that she's left for us without looking at there was some intestinal fortitude in this young woman that grew and grew as she became older and more mature and took on lynching pretty much by herself. I mean, they had a bounty on her head, burned down her newspaper,
Her press.
and
Yeah. Mhm,
yes, because she was unstoppable and frightening to
mhm.
the establishment because of her inner capacity to really believe that she could make a difference. But one
Yeah.
woman, so that I think that's a
And
part of why I wanted to write this book about her, because I'm thinking if she could have that kind of courage, given the situation she was in the middle of, then what was I going to do with my 3 academic degrees and all the stuff I've got going on? And here she is out with nothing, pretty much, standing up like an amazing warrior person in a lot of possibilities for danger to come to her, harm to come to her.
yeah, so and that's really so in the book you rightly identify that she was quote an ordinary woman, right? So you
Right.
just laid out all of this amazing stuff that she did, and yet she was ordinary. And so I wonder what do you think we can draw from her and sort of pull into 2023? Where are areas where we need to sort of apply that intestinal fortitude? Like where in your perspective, where are we missing some of the application and that resistance, that active resistance? Where could we apply it today? You think
Well, I think across the board,
as ordinary people ourselves?
yeah,
Yeah, as ordinary
I
people.
think ordinary people can need to we as ordinary people we need to stop and take a look at ourselves and see what our lives are really about. I think that we have allowed ourselves to drink the Kool-Aid of liberation that didn't have liberation in it, and we need to be more careful about that and to think about what does it mean to be a liberated people. We have a lot of things have shifted, and I'm just talking now in terms of Black and white. There are other groups of people oppressed in the country that don't need to be left out as well. Native people and Latinx people and Asian American Pacific Islanders do not need to be left out of this equation. But we have Ida B. Wells's focus was Black white. And since
Right.
we're talking about that and talking about lynching, that was the primary focus of the folks who were being lynched, because the people who, the slaveholders, thought they had brought a group of people to be here who were going to be slaves forever. And when the enslaved Africans started to show signs of they understood their humanity and they weren't planning on being slaves forever, that was a serious problem. And so I think that we need to be careful in the 21st century that we don't allow our little bit of economic prowess and a few things that we can do that we couldn't do 50 years ago to lull us to sleep and forget that we still have too many deficits when it comes to real, true equality and respect as human beings in all of the systems across the whole US, you know, in education and politics and the judicial system, the legal system. There's still so much imbalance and so much stuff that we need to not be asleep about. And it's really critical for us, and particularly for young folks in your age group, to be supported by people in my age group to stand up to be counted. I need to stand up and be counted for the 70-year-olds. And you're what, in your 20s or 30 or 20s, I'm guessing.
No, but thank you. Thank you. A little bit older than that.
So somebody had a question about why Ida B. Wells was not considered, got overlooked during her era. And I want to say it's two reasons. She was a woman,
Okay.
and she was Black. And she was, the Black men were jealous, and of course white people weren't about to give her any credit. And even Black women had trouble with her because she was so outspoken and so not in the society kind of be nice category. She's out here talking, you know, the way she was. She worked a lot in the women's rights movement, and even Susan B. Anthony got upset when she got married and thought she should have stayed single because that's what she had done, as if it was any of her business what Ida B wanted to do with her life. But Ida B says, I was all by myself. I mean, she's out there by herself trying to change the world, and she didn't have support. And she didn't have to explain why she wanted to be married because it's her business what she wanted to do. But for Susan B. Anthony to think that she had a right to question her is an answer to how she wasn't being seen as a woman with her own agency to do what she wanted to do. And Susan B. Anthony wanted her to do what she thought she should be doing. And that is a good sign of not being respectful of the other person as an equal human being who can make her own decisions. And that goes right to the core of this whole denigration that has kept the systems of inequality intact. I mean, we're still there with so much need to speak up and speak out and be heard. And to get back to your question a little bit about where do we need to take up agency, we need to speak up louder and quicker and together as people of color and Black people, and white people need to listen, and we need to become more supportive of one another and more invested in each other and more committed to what, you know, I need to be concerned about your livelihood and your future as you need to be about mine. And because we have a choice not to be, but we don't need to take that choice. We need to say, until you have what you need, I won't rest. And no matter what I get, I won't rest until everybody's got what they need. I will keep on being a fighter. I will keep standing up to the plate. That was the thing they wanted Ida B. Wells to do. What, you got a husband and kids and your husband's a lawyer and your life is pretty good. Why don't you sit down and shut up?
Right.
You know, and she wouldn't do it because she had her own sense of who she was and what she was here to do. And she was about to do it. And I have had people write to me and say, you got your Ph.D., you're a professor, and you've written, and you're this, and you're that. Why don't you be quiet? That's more reasons not to be quiet. That is a call to to stand up and be counted, because you can be, because you have the agency. And you know that scripture says that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I believe
Right.
that from the bottom of my heart.
So they want to, there are people itching to ask you questions that are just
Yes,
on the other
okay,
side of
I'm
this.
ready.
So can I just want to ask you one more, just
Well,
one,
now
and
let's,
then
how
I'm
much
done
more
for the
time
night.
do I have? Is this about your dissertation?
Oh, this is at 30?
It's at 30 minutes, yeah.
I'll email you the other question. All right,
Yeah,
so
please.
we are here. I'm gonna turn the camera around, and then read.
So I can see
Okay.
people.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Okay, so
All right.
yeah, so
I see you.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meeks. One question I had, I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook that you and Liam Stroop co-read and on Audible. I think that's a really wonderful. I had a wonderful time listening to that, and I'm listening to it again. I wanted to hear more about your work with the Absalom Jones Center, and if you could just say how that came to be, and where it is now, where you hope it goes, and also any lessons that you can offer us. You mentioned, I think, in a personal way, how Ida B. Wells can inspire us. How can she inspire us as an organization, particularly how can she challenge us to, you know,
Yeah.
what we need to do as an organization?
I think the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing, the website is Center for Racial Healing. If you type that into your browser, it'll come up and you'll get a lot of information, which would be the easiest way for you to learn more about us. We're located here, of course, in Atlanta, and we are across the street from Clark Atlanta University, Spelman College, Morehouse College, and Morris Brown, and the Interdenominational Theological Seminary, which is known as the Atlanta University Consortium. And we are delighted to be in that community. We are located on Atlanta Student Movement Boulevard, which it was named after the students who took on the task of desegregating downtown Atlanta. And we're named for Absalom Jones, who was the first ordained priest in the Anglican Church, the first ordained Black priest in the Anglican Church, it took 9 years for him to be ordained because the church didn't want to have him be ordained. So we have a tall mountain to climb just being in this historical space. And we try very hard to be a place where we say we're a brave place where the truth can be told. So that's like a 2-second summary of what we are about. We have in front of our building a memorial to the 800 plus people who were lynched in the state of Georgia. We have done a lot of work here around lynching. We have 3 different monuments that we placed around the state. And then we did this one honoring all of the people whose names we could find. And I'm a firm believer in everybody everywhere doing what they can to remember the lynched. I think that is one of the ways we get at dealing with issues of healing and wounding around race for Black and brown and white people, that cuts across a lot of stuff and gets us down to the core of the work that needs to be done. So anybody that's doing anything on lynching gets nothing but support from me in any way I can give it. And I love what the Equal Justice Initiative has done in Alabama, and also the ways in which people are beginning to bring those monuments from Equal Justice Initiative to their home territories. I don't know how much you've investigated that, but as an organization, I would encourage you to get engaged with them and see how you can bring stuff to Tennessee, because you certainly have people who were lynched there. I'm guessing you know all about them since you are who you are. As far as inspiration, I think the thing about Ida B. Wells is the most amazing to me is the understanding that this was not a journey that you're going to get done with next week because you worked real hard. That you have to be willing to stay committed to this work until it's done. And it's not going to be done in our lifetime, which means you're going to do it your whole life. And that's what most people miss out on. They think if they just work enough, how many times have I heard, well, I thought we were done with that. Well, I sure wish we were, but we're not. And so the reality is that racism is alive and well in the United States of America, and not only the United States, but this is where we are, and this is the battle we have to fight. And we need to not forget that fact. And it's every day. Vigilance is the requirement. Every day. We cannot get up in the mornings thinking, well, I did a lot yesterday, so I won't pay attention today, because today will be the day that it runs you over. So and Ida B. Wells helps me. I mean, I just love her. I'm always talking about her. My students actually told me that I remind them of her, which was one of the best compliments I could have ever gotten from them, because I just think so much of her fortitude, her courage, her brilliance, and her imagination, her ability to be a total resistor. In spite, she could have just gone to be a socialite. Or, if you want to read a delightful book, you need to read her Memphis Diary. Maybe you have or haven't, but she talks about her early life. And she was a frivolous little thing, spending her money not wisely, and boys didn't like her because she was too smart. I identify with that, because boys didn't like me because I was too smart and ahead of them, too far ahead of them most of the time. So reading her diary has been really delightful. But to be an ordinary human being who says yes to what is presented to you. And I think she encourages us to do that better than a lot of people do. So, and to keep on digging for the bigger courage in yourself, and as each individual makes that commitment as a part of an organization, it makes the organization stronger. It makes the organization be more courageous and get more done. And all of it for the good of the whole. One of the things she said when her friends were lynched there in Memphis, that she wanted to take all the Africans and go away. Take us all and take everybody and go somewhere that would be safe. This sense of that the whole community belongs to you, and you want the good of the community. You want the community to thrive. We need to recover that right now in this moment, maybe more than anything else. We have lost sight of the necessity to care about one another. And no matter what we do, if we quit caring about each other, it's going to be nullified. And I don't think the planet can sustain us going around just continuously spewing out hate. So I really want to encourage you as an organization and as individuals to make a new commitment to being as kind as you can to everybody that crosses your path. Because kindness breeds kindness, just like anger and rage breed anger and rage and hate. And we don't need any more of that. We got enough of it already to last us for a few eons. So, and Ida B is, she could have been a hateful, bitter woman. She helped to found the NAACP, but you don't see her name listed when you look at who did that. You have to dig around to find that. So
We have a question for you in the chat.
mhm.
Oh, do you have, can you read it, or do I need to read it
Is
to
it
you?
from Paul McLean?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, what is the question?
So he wanted, let me skip to the part that he wanted to know what you thought about parallels between indigenous people here and Palestinians. How can we support the human rights of oppressed Palestinians and simultaneously the terrorist attacks on Israelis by Hamas? Is there enough nuance in our polarized society to do both?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I want to say, can we go back to is he where is he online here?
Oh, no,
I'm not-
yeah, he's not here.
Okay. For the first of all, what I want to say is one group of people cannot oppress another group of people and expect them to take it sitting down. So as far as the Middle East is concerned, as far as the Palestinians and the Israelis are concerned, they're going to have to find a way to live together. They don't really have that much land. And they're either going to find a way to live together, as Dr. King said about us in this country, or we're going to all perish together as fools. So that's the first thing. That when I was in Israel some years ago, I remember hearing young Palestinians say, we'll fight until the last Palestinian is dead. And then the Israelis saying, we'll fight till the last Jew is dead. Well, that attitude is going to get both of you dead. And then who will fight? Who will be there? So I think that, and in this country, we have got native people that we have taken their land and put them all in these reservations, and then they are doing the best they can, I'm guessing, trying to stay up with themselves with a lot of struggle and suffering. And oppression is oppression. It does not matter who's doing it or where it's happening. It is trying to denigrate another human being's right to be a free agent, and trying to find ways to manage and control them. That is wrong, and nobody has been given that right. And so I don't care where you are, I don't care who's happening to, it should not be happening. And if you do that kind of thing, you oppress yourself too, because you cannot foster oppression on another person without being oppressed yourself, because as long as people are not free, you can't really be free either. But people who are oppressors don't know that. They think that they can, and particularly when they get the oppressed to fight each other, which is what we've been really pretty good at in America. So as far as how we go forward, and as far as the question regarding, how can we be connected to, like in terms of native peoples, the indigenous people in this country are here, and we can reach out to them. I don't know I'm guessing you're in the same kind of pathway that we are here in Georgia. So some of those folks on the way to the Trail of Tears were, I guess, coming through Tennessee. I don't know about Memphis so much, but that's a good thing to look into and see what you need to be doing. There's this project that someone's been doing around the Holocaust, finding places where people were killed, and putting down these memory stones, putting down stones to remember this happened there. I wonder, having I have a friend who's working on all of that, and I wonder what that would be like if we did that in terms of where the native peoples were. We put on our website a statement on the center's website. Our diocese has been less courageous than we have been, but we put on a statement about being on the land of the people who used to live here, and being thankful for their lives, and being conscious that this land belonged to them first. And now, even though many of us who are of African descent didn't come to take their land, we got brought here, but we're here now, and we need to acknowledge that. So acknowledgement is a good place to start. And then seeing, I don't know about you all there in Memphis, but I don't go to the grocery store and see a lot of indigenous people. We've done a good job of pushing them out of our sight, so we don't have to look at them, so we don't have to think about what we did. We can act like we don't know it happened. And that's the first step, to start naming, yeah, it happened. We did this and we did that. And that's part of the history. So now let me live my life as faithfully as I can in the face of what that history is. And then it's not about getting up in the mornings feeling remorse and being immobilized by shame. It is about getting up with the intention to do the best you can to be a liberated human being, and to make sure other people can be liberated too. And so I think that's what we can do. You know, we can sit around and be immobilized and depressed, or we can say, I know the history is pretty rotten, but I don't want us to keep on living it. So here I am, which is what you're doing. And we just have to keep doing it and keep being faithful and keep being conscious that there's no magic here. Not going to be done in a minute. Though we like magic, I wouldn't mind a little magic myself, you know, but but I can't find it. It's all about perseverance and vigilance and persistence and faith and hope and a willingness to keep on going day by day. And I just, you know, I think that finding folks doing that is one of the greatest joys of my life. And that's what makes me say yes to invitations to conversations like this, because I want to be supportive of anybody who's trying to be about the business of walking up the hill rather than sitting at the bottom of it, lamenting about how high it is.
One, Randy?
Okay, but
All right, last question.
Where is the
Okay.
Oh, maybe you don't need it. Maybe you don't need it.
I'm Virginia, and we here at the Lynch Site Project are making a quilt to commemorate people that's lynched in Shelby County, Tennessee. And so I'm very interested in the wall hanging quilt behind you, and wondered if you could tell us how it originated, who made it, and so forth.
So the quilt behind me was made by a fabric artist in Macon, Georgia, and it is Lorraine Hansberry, the A Raisin in the Sun, the playwright, the play that you would be familiar with is A Raisin in the Sun. And if you could barely see her picture, but there's a little picture of her in the middle of it. And then around it is just scenes from the movie A Raisin in the Sun. My memoir is coming out in February, and it's called The Quilted Life: Reflections of a Sharecropper's Daughter. And my current book is The Night is Long, but Light Comes in the Morning: Meditations on Racial Healing. I would invite you to take a look at those. Whether the new book won't be out till February, but my new book, my memoir, has a quilt on it. The cover is the quilt that was made at a conference that I did, and the quilt we named is called Rags of Love. And it's because quilting is about taking discarded stuff and remaking it. A great metaphor for imagination, because imagination believes that you can take something, as somebody said, you can make something out of nothing. You know, you got an old dress you need to discard because it's raggedy, but you can find a piece of it that can go as a quilt scrap. And so my mother was a quilter, and she kept a sack of rags, her quilt rag sack. And so that is how the talk I did was on how to create a sustainable earth. And I said we would do that by all of us bringing something out of our rag sack. You know, what is it that I can bring? Hope, imagination, perseverance, courage, a willingness to inspire people, whatever it is, to see that as a contribution to helping to create a sustainable earth. And so we had the participants, a conference with 500 people, make a quilt. And they made this quilt that was brought in on the morning I was speaking and hung behind me. And that will be the cover of my new book. So if you get the new book, you'll see that quilt. So I think quilts are fantastic. And I think that the metaphor of the quilt for life in general is a wonderful thing, because it relieves you of the burden of having to have all the answers. All you got to do is bring your little scrap. And you put your little scrap with all the other scraps, and you end up with something that wasn't there before. And you can celebrate as a community. And that's so important. Otherwise, we get off into these silos and then we think we're supposed to know everything and we don't. And then we get upset and go down the wrong roads. So anyway, I'm a big proponent of that. So I'm so glad to hear that you all are making a quilt. And I hope that you'll make quilts with a lot of things.
Available for pre-order.
It is available for pre-order on Amazon. Yes, for those who are.
Quilt, the Quilted Life.
Yes, yes.
I didn't even know
Yes,
that myself.
we have very industrial. Yeah.
Oh, there it is. I didn't even know that. Thank you.
Your
They didn't even
publisher
tell
is,
me.
They're earning their paycheck for you.
She's already got at least.
Yeah,
So-
I gotta call them up and tell them thank you. I've never seen that, so thank you. That's marvelous. I'm gonna
All right, we
be
have one
coming. I'm
last
coming to Memphis. I'm coming to Memphis in February, and Tom will tell you all more about that. So hopefully, I get to meet some
Yes,
of
and that
you.
might be what Tom has to say.
That is what I was going to say, Dr. Meeks. You have made our day, if not our week, by being with us tonight. And you're gonna make our year when you come in February. She'll be here from Ash Wednesday till the following Sunday, which Ash Wednesday next year is Valentine's Day. So you can remember
Mhm.
that Valentine's Day next year, God willing, Dr. Meeks will be with us for quite a period of time. She'll be teaching and preaching and book signing, and we pray that new book will be ready for people to pick up while you're here.
They told me the beginning of February, and since they're putting out something in October about it, do they say when you can expect to get it on the pre-order? Because sometimes they'll tell you.
Let me see.
No, it doesn't yet.
Okay, well, so it's still a little early, but I'm pretty sure they told me early February, so I'm really hoping. And if it's not, we'll have something that I can sign to give to people, and then people can order it and put the little sign thing in the book when they get it. We'll figure out something about that. But the most important thing is just the energy around and staying hopeful. I just don't think there's any substitute for all of us to try to keep hanging on to hope and keep being as brave as we can be every day as we do that.
All right. Someone in the chat said February 13th. I guess it'll
Oh,
drop.
is that what it says? Okay, that's good to know that I'm
Oh.
finding out things from meeting with you that I didn't even know.
Yeah, Laura Chatfield said that. So yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You are so very welcome, and thank you all for being faithful and being on this journey. We're all on it together. We're all wounded, and we're all looking for healing. And we need to be patient with one another and kind to one another, and vigilant, and be no nonsense about the work, like Ida B was. I mean, she's my heroine, if you can't tell. And I don't study many people that I wish I could meet, but I wish I could meet her and just hang out with her for a long time, because she just really, we had so many threads that connected. So I'm gonna take off. I've got to get ready to go tomorrow to go someplace to do to Asheville to do a talk. So I need to go wash clothes and pack. So take care, and I'll see you in February.
Thank you again.
Good night.
And you could just log off and there you go. Wow. That was great. And thank you to Jasper for leading this session. Thoughts on what we just heard? I know Tom wanted to do one last thing, which we'll do after he has a musical thing he'd like to share with us that's relevant to what's going on today. But yeah, what are people's thoughts on what we just heard? We still have some people online who are tuning in. So if you guys have thoughts as well as we digest this thing, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A and or the chat. So yeah.
Jasper, in this
business of human rights before you were born. And I spoke to Elie Wiesel and I said, what have you learned from the Holocaust? The questions from the audience.
Mhm.
And he said, I've learned, and I think Jews have learned, that the phrase, I shall because I must. And I posed that question to an Armenian bishop who was a historian, had a doctorate in history. And he said that the Armenians learned that the more miserable they were, the more likelihood that they wouldn't be annihilated. That the Persians and the Arabs and the Chechens, whatever, he listed all the countries around them, Turkey. He said, we exist because 1700 years ago we were declared a nation, and all our neighbors know how miserable we can be as oppressed people. What is it, and you may not be able to answer this immediately, what is it that you've learned or that has kept the African American community thriving? What is there a similar statement of wisdom?
To be miserable.
Those were the
See, this was the
specific
thing,
words.
and this was the thing, you know, I had a particular line of questioning for Dr. Meeks because I've been really interested in hope lately. Because I feel like, and hear me all the way out, I feel like sometimes we're not honest with reality. About, and that's the thing that's so compelling to me about Ida B. Wells. It was her honesty that allowed us to see what was really going on. You know, you think about the myths that were around lynching, that were governing the justifications for lynching. And she admits in her autobiography, she started to believe them. Frederick Douglass admits he started to believe them until he read Southern Horse. And it was like Ida B. Wells' ability to be honest, like she was after the truth, right? Shining that light of truth. And at times I worry that like we would substitute that pursuit for optimism or progress. And I think Black people, at least historically, didn't do that. Like they didn't yield the truth for optimism. They didn't yield the truth for hope, right? They weren't, because if that's the case, then they should just, there would have been a lot more that would have been quiet, right? Because there's a false harmony that comes with silence. So I mean, I think to me, I don't know, like, I mean, sure, there's a ton of phrases and motifs that have come out of mouths and of pens. But I think I'm curious about like hope right now. And asking, that's why I was asking Dr. Meeks those questions. Because I think that hope demands a certain wrestling with reality that I'm not always sure we're committed to anymore. Because we would just rather be at peace. And it's just easier to be at peace than to be hopeful. That sounds weird, right?
No, that's how the war in Northern Ireland ended. Two women came out and did their wash with a stone wall, and they'd never met, but they got to talk, and they just said, both admitted they're tired of this, and one was Catholic and one was Protestant, and they formed a peace commission and
Right.
won, I think, the Nobel Prize for their work.
Ida B. Wells loved the truth so much that like they burnt her press down and she should have just gone quiet for the sake of safety. That's what she should have done. It was a message. Like they actually said it in the editorial, if you come back, we're gonna kill you, basically, right? And she would not, like, so imagining loving truth that much, that you would allow your life to become miserable. Because she goes to New York and she's trying to make her way. She ends up in Chicago. Like her life was disrupted in such a loud way and in such a frustrating way. And she didn't ever stop. Like She writes Southern Horror. She writes Red Records. She writes Mob Rule in New Orleans. She writes Lynch Law in Georgia. She's at the Chicago Exposition. She's like, she absolutely refuses. And as a young Black woman in that time, it was risky. Right, yeah, exactly. And she just loved truth that much. And I wish, I'm wondering if we could get a critical mass of us who love truth as much as Ida B. Wells did.
Where does that intersect with hope?
Hope?
Yeah, where does that love of truth in the face of blatant cruelty in
Yeah.
the position? Where does that intersect?
I mean, hope is the thing that keeps you oriented toward the truth, or like driving toward the truth. Because and in my mind, so like hope and optimism are not the same thing. Optimism is just, it's gonna progress, and I'm banking on it. Hope is like, I have to like get in the mud in order for this thing to happen, right? And so like hope and truth are linked because it feels like the world wants to beat that love of truth out of you for the sake of complacency, and it'll throw you some scraps, right? So like hope is the thing for me that drove her to keep, because why would she write these little pamphlets and spend money that she didn't have and borrow to, rob Peter to borrow from Paul to take, so she was doing all of this stuff. It was only hope to me, right? That would, but like the whole hope put her in such a position that her life was way more miserable than it had to be, right? And so I think like hope puts you up against, it makes you make choices where one could, this false harmony, you could choose it, but hope is screaming otherwise. Does that answer? Like that's to me is the relationship. Yeah.
It's not a conventional answer.
Was it a bad
It's not a
answer?
conventional answer.
Was it a bad answer?
No.
There's no.
Writing a PhD on Ida B. Wells is not a conventional life.
No, that's true too. I have been told there are other routes. There are more convenient routes. Yeah. But I would, so the question, can I throw the question that I didn't get to ask everybody?
Yeah, sure.
So one of the things that was really interesting to me in this book, because it's co-written by a white man and a Black woman, and that just stuck with me while I was reading. And there's this moment where he talks about Thomas Jefferson, and Dr. Meeks like chastises him. She, in a loving way, but she kind of says like, you kind of like hedged it, like what he really was. Because it was about, he wrote the Constitution, the Declaration, all that stuff, the good stuff he did, right?
She calls him out several times.
No, right. And she presses him on, because like there was a myth, right? He's not that bad. Like, yeah, he did this, but like it seemed like he was pulling that way, and she pulls him back. And then he says something about Ida B. Wells, about how she didn't get many victories in her life, and she pushes back against that, right? And so like these are interesting moments. And so then in the 7th chapter, he says, yeah, because that not many victories, that ends the 6th chapter. And then the 7th chapter is this discussion between the two of them. And he says, yeah, I said that, but now it changed. And if I was fascinated in the fact that they left it in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm sure a publisher would have been like, oh, well, we could clean that up. Yeah, like we could take that last paragraph out of the 6th chapter, and they resisted that. And so it becomes a really interesting model about how hard these conversations are, and how it's not necessarily like an ascription to someone's motives. If you go, I don't know if Jefferson right? Like those moments, and how they're critical to like us being together. That's why I was so drawn to the we part, and how the we gets in the way. And sometimes it like covers over our responsibilities. Because if we're already we, then we don't have to do work to become we, right? Because we're already there, right? But we takes work. And you see that work in this book. And it just kept making me think about LSP and this project that is really hard right now to do, because we have to like work toward that, with that true we, the beloved community, that kind of thing. That's the frame they were pushing toward. And so it just made me think about what it means. Because she then thanks him like, well, I love that we had this chance to do this together. And so like rebuke, or just sort of the checking, becomes a part of being together. and how we can like stomach that together, like moving forward. Like it's an incredible model for our project because they did a lot of that hard work, and it is hard work because sometimes history we would rather myth triumph history. We'd rather Jefferson be all right. He made some mistakes, but he was okay. So can we give up myth for the sake of the truth? Because I think that's the path to where we can really become who we think we want to become as LSP.
And that's the struggle we're in now.
Right,
These state
absolutely.
laws wanting to hold on to the myth
Yeah.
and not wanting to be challenged.
Yeah.
Carla has to say.
So she talked about, you have to be willing to have the hard conversations. And we talk about that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really wondering, when do we have these conversations where a Black person says something and the white person says, I don't think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And that turns out to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been in one of those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of the conversations I've been a part of, it's white people having to grapple with the myths that they cling to, or and a lot of, everybody here is of goodwill, and they're obviously wanting to do this work. But we still do really stupid things as white people, and we have blind spots. And it seems to me like I refuse to be a part of some interracial dialogue and all that stuff in certain settings, because every time I was, Black people were carrying all the water, white people were saying stupid stuff, and then when Black people called them on that, they got their feelings hurt.
Yeah, right.
And it just seems like there really isn't anything that Black people need to do in this conversation.
Yeah.
It's what we need to do. And so I mean, just as a thought experiment, have you been a part of has anybody here been a part of any discussion where a Black person, where somebody said, I don't think what you're saying is really true.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to think about that, or, it
Yeah.
just doesn't seem like that's ever the case.
Yeah.
And it could be because most of the time when the Black people show up at these kind of things, they're prepared and they're ready and they're, they know what they're getting into.
Right.
And they're not gonna say stupid things or something, I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. It's a good question.
When I hear you say that, you talk about, Black people come prepared or whatnot, I don't think it's like, oh, I'm gonna sit here and study just in case. I mean,
No.
ignorant, you know what I'm saying?
No, I'm just
So I
saying,
guess
you're used
right.
to having to deal with stupid white people, stupid statements.
Well, what I was getting at is, I think Black people, or really any other, they deal with, talk about, think about those things that make them an other a whole heck of a lot more all the time, as opposed to white people or someone in the majority.
That's right.
That's why it kind of always seems like they're prepared. Like, well, we talk about this every day. Even now, I'm 40-something years old. I've been in corporate America, and still to this day, if I walk into a room, I'm the only Black person. Like, oh, I'm a Black person. I don't, I know they're African American CEOs. I think I work for a good company, but still, it's like, oh, mental note, I'm only a Black person. How many times do white people walk into a room? Oh, we're all white people again. Cool. I mean, I don't know.
No, you're right.
So
I'm trying to.
And to the point, I mean, Randy was there at the beginning. It was all white people and Randy. And we had a discussion about we need more Black people in here. And I actually argued about it. And I said, this is white people's work. I mean, I welcome anybody, but this is white people's work. And Randy respectfully disagreed, and you were right, because we end up doing stupid things if y'all aren't here helping us, to be sensitive to all the variations and you know, everything that, we need to be aware of and educated about. So I was wrong, right?
It's to be too heavy, a burden to wax.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like we have to be the experts.
Mhm.
And I've been in many anti-racism,
Oh, yeah, you're always there.
I mean, I've been involved in many anti-racism dialogue, whatever it is, right? It's almost like you're being looked at to be the experts on it. You know what I mean? And that's a heavy cross to bear. You know what I mean? Because we're looking for you to kind of tell us, I mean, what to do. Wait a minute, something's wrong with that picture. You know what I mean? Racism, white supremacy, where it is, right, affects all of us. Very different where it is, right? And sometimes I get tired. I get tired of talking to whites about racism, white supremacy, where it is, right? Because it is a burden where it is, right? It's almost like we're looking to you. Yeah, I can speak about it, or from my perspective. I mean, I can't speak of, you know, like Jasper or Rich, or what it is, right? Because we have different experience. You know what I mean? About how racism affects us, whatever it is, right? But then when you deal with white supremacy, racism, I've had to experience racism, hate, whatever it is, right? And sometimes I get tired. I really do. I get tired of carrying that weight of trying to, this work is uncomfortable. It has weight to it. And there's a risk to it that weighs you down. As I was listening to her, I came here with a heavy heart. I'm tired, really. And I talked to Virginia about the book project. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna continue, because I am tired. But listen to her. The question that Virginia asked gave me hope to continue. Not because it's comfortable, but it's during the time of being uncomfortable. I'm reminded of Dr. King when he said the measure, I'm not gonna say man, the measure of a person, right, it's not when they're going through comfort, but when they're going through uncomfort. She gave me hope to continue to do this work. It's because I'm not doing it by myself. Sometimes I think I am, because I've been around it since the beginning. And sometimes I'm just pure tired of being out there all the time. I feel like I'm by myself a lot. And I go out there in the community in many places and meet many people. That's my gift. But I get tired. My car situation, that's another chapter where it is, right? But sometimes I just want to stop and do nothing. I have a passion. I mean, for this work. This is a work that I was called for. It's not something I chose. It's something I'm called for. But sometimes I am just plain tired of carrying, almost like carrying other people's crosses. You know, I mean, it just wears you out. But to listen to her tonight, and I'm familiar with her, because I wrote her many years ago, when I read the article about the Episcopal Church, the diocese actually confronted the lynching in the state. It gave me a boost of energy. And then what you shared about the name. These little triplets is what keeps me going. Even when I don't feel like going on. And then listening to Reverend Wheeler, the cousin of Edmund Till, talk about speaking up to the truth. That was heavy. You know what I mean? But he said I had to speak it because that was my cousin. I was there at the grocery store. You know what I mean? And he explained all the stuff that actually happened afterwards, what it is, right? You know, his uncle Moses Wright and everything. But yeah, to speak up and speak out is going to start good trouble. You know, but this was good for me. This was good food for me to keep me going, even when I don't feel like going. And I'm reminded it's not the feeling, it's the willing to keep doing it, no matter how it feels. You know, but yeah, I am tired. I am. I've been around since the beginning, like you and many others where it is. I've seen many things But I think it's critical that we're back to Jack. I think we gotta be real with each other. You know what I mean? We gotta be real with each other and tell each other exactly how we feel. Between black and white or whatever it is, right? Yeah, we gotta be real with each other because the real conversation, crazy conversation, is among ourselves. I mean, to build that sense of community, beloved community, whatever, it's about being real with each other. You know, and sometimes I keep a lot of stuff inside of me because I spend a lot of time by myself. Sometimes I'm not at a place where, where I feel, where there's time, an opportunity to rage, so to speak, to get a lot of the stuff out of me. I got a lot of stuff stuck in my gut, where it is, right? To survive, so to speak. But yeah, I needed this food for my soul. You know what I mean? But I needed the community for food for the soul. For both. But yeah, I'm tired. But I'm gonna still go on, even in the midst of my weariness, my heaviness, my concerns, my LSP. Yeah.
She says something to piggyback on. She says something in the book right after that exchange about Jefferson and Wells. And so this is her talking to Stroop, I believe. She says, it was wonderful for us to talk about this and to realize the difference in the way the view appears to the white man, though progressive and liberated, and the African-American woman still pursuing healing. It is not that one is correct. This is the part that I've been wrestling with all day. It is not that one is correct and that the other is incorrect. Actually, that is mostly beside the point. The point is that we heard each other and had a conversation about the difference in the manner in which we see the world. So I spent the day daydreaming about if we could put the desire to be right down and be honest about how we see the world. Now it takes vulnerability, takes trust, right? It takes a relationship, but it's not about correction as it's much about seeing the other person. And I think in a lot of these dialogues, we haven't developed enough trust and they're just programs. And so everyone's on their best behavior. They say what they know they're supposed. So there's a script in America that people know to run so that they can seem safe. They know what words not to say. They know what phrases not to say. They know what ideas not to, and yet many of us harbor them inside of us, but we would dare not say it out loud for fear of being seen as a bad person. And we want to be good people. So I wonder if we surrendered this desire to be clean at the end of the conversation. If we surrendered the desire to be absolved by the end of the conversation and we're just honest and we could see each other, I think that would be, it would make for a more efficient course to progress than this thing where we're doing where we kind of dance around each other. We don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to say the wrong thing. Because it's better to be vulnerable, I think, and to be honest. And then once it's out on the table, if there's, if truth is reigning, if relationship is reigning, then that person won't get, even if in the off chance they said a bad thing, they won't get jumped on or beat up, because that's not the purpose, right? There's no righteousness in me beating you up. There's nothing I gain from beating up on a white person for having a mythological idea that's bad. I don't benefit from that. So if we just we're more vulnerable, right? And we're willing to give our stories to the other person and know that we could trust them with it, I think we could get further along. Randy just being honest there, I'm tired, right? That's honest. Not oh yeah, he could give the mantra, you got to keep up the fight, all that. That's not real. Randy's tired, and it's okay. You know what I mean? We need to understand that to be true. So I wonder if we could that's my new daydream. What if we could just be vulnerable with each other and honest? Where could we get together if we did that, as opposed to just running the things that we know we're supposed to say?
So I'm Tom and I'm a white ordained man. And Catherine Meeks is not. And I think that's why she is so important to me, because she is so different and she has that other point of view or points of view and other life that she's lived, and I can learn from it. One of the things that the center talks about, it's one of their themes or memes or whatever, is I am a brave space. And one of the things I learned by being part of the Lynching Sites Project over the last few years is that white folk talk a lot about being safe in order to be vulnerable. And black folk, I heard, talk a lot about being brave because there is no safe place.
Right. Yeah.
And so I began to think about what it would be like to create a place where we could be both. Safe enough to be brave enough to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's a different take on what you're saying, I think. But as a ordained white man, I've been programmed to do everything but that. To not be vulnerable, not be brave. Dr. Meeks, I know, is a few years older than me. And we get to a certain age in life where we, as one clergy friend of mine, a woman once said, I'm too old and cranky to put up with that stuff, the way it wasn't stuff anymore. It's time to speak up and stand up. And so I'm here tonight because I got a text message from Rich a week ago saying, do you think Dr. Meeks can speak tonight? And I said, I have no idea, but let's see what we can do. And I'm here because I love what has happened to me and being part of this community. I have experienced safety and bravery and vulnerability. And I'm still looking for it.
Anyone else that hasn't shared? Hold on. Anyone else that hasn't shared just real quick? No one? Go ahead.
I attended a play at the Hattie this week that stands above all others. It's called Father Comes Home from the Wars, and it runs through October 22nd. The woman, Parks,
Susan Laurie Parks.
Won a Pulitzer Prize.
Mm-hmm.
The first black woman who won a Pulitzer Prize. Heads and shoulders above anything I've seen in the Hattie. If you want a synopsis of tonight's conversation, see My Father Comes Home from the Wars. He is an African slave in Georgia, and his master asked him to join the Confederacy and go to war and serve under him as his personal valet. And he's the colonel. And he takes that back to the slave quarters, and they have a frank discussion. It's vulnerable, and it left you gasping when
Where is it showing?
$14 or $17 a ticket.
Okay.
It's a play.
It's
And
also a book.
It might be a book. She wrote the play.
Okay.
It is. There were points where the audience was gasping, like trying to, like, oh my God. Yeah. There's a speech by the colonel that is like, oh, I've waited all my life for this. That's it. Father comes home from the Lord. And then he goes and serves. And then he comes back. And then there's a whole issue of who he was married to, and she thought he was dead. It just reverts back to this community involvement of different communities putting information in,
Mhm.
synthesizing. It's, yeah.
All right, thanks for that. Wow, we heard a lot today. For those online, thank you again for joining us for this October. Next month, November, we will be on the road. We will be at the main library here in Memphis, the Benjamin L. Hooks Public Library here in Memphis. Yeah, taking our message on the road. We look forward to seeing you. Thanks again, and you hear from us on our newsletters.